Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
In alphabetical order, I guess AJ, Lori, Robert, and Sean. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks.
Good to
You
be
guys
here.
are the OGs of CRO.
I think Flint would have a contention with that.
I mean, he's welcome to join.
He's the double O.
So we'll be talking about ChatGPT/AI applied to CRO, if there's any application possible there. So this is a fireside chat, so it's pretty informal, kind of casual conversation about the topic. Each time we do one of these, we'll have a different topic. Maybe you guys can comment and ask questions in the chat if you're interested in these topics and you want to, interact with these experts on the panel here. But in any case, we'll have a conversation for about 45 minutes, have an interesting conversation. That's going to be about it. Why don't we start with just a quick introduction, maybe alphabetical order. So AJ, you want to get started?
Sure. I'm so glad my parents named me a name that starts with AJ.
Unfair advantage.
Thanks for having us on, Matt. I'm really excited to be here with all the other experts today. I'm the founder of a company called Experiment Zone based in Austin, Texas. We solely focus on conversion rate optimization, and we bring in elements of user experience research to make sure that we're asking the why and really rooting all the things we're doing in the problems customers have, and then finding opportunities to grow based on those problems. So excited to be here.
Thank you, AJ, for the intro. Thanks for being here. Lori?
Hi, I'm Lori Appelman. I'm the founder of Redline Minds. We're an e-commerce exclusive boutique agency. We build them. We do most marketing services, and once in a blue moon, we run them for the store owner. So that's what we do. I've been around for a couple of decades, so nice to be able to participate in these kinds of conversations.
Absolutely. Great to have you with us, Lori. Let's go with Robert.
Aren't you next alphabetically?
Yeah, but I'm just a moderator.
I'm just a moderator. Yeah, skipping out.
I'm Robert Portillo. I'm the founder of Nimbus Marketing. We provide search engine optimization and conversion rate optimization services for our clients because we know that in order to succeed online, you need to get found and then convert the people that find you into customers. Also the founder of Conversion Rate Optimization Junkies. We're approaching 10,000 members, and you're welcome. Anybody watching this is welcome to join. Great group.
Thank you, Robert. And Sean?
Hi, my name is Sean Altman. I do not have an agency, haven't put together, used to have a prototypical company. We build prototypical websites for folks, and we did marketing as well. But my background is as an enterprise dev for IBM and AT&T, and then I later went in to work as a tech lead for e-commerce agencies. We had a CRO team there, and I think got a lot of my passion and drive for CRO up and going. And I've recently, in the last 3 years, helped launch a company full-time, an engineering company, and they've got several websites. On the side, I just really enjoy helping people. So I consider myself, I don't know, a nerd or a geek or a GERD, I don't know, a blend of the two. So just really like learning, and I really like meeting people, and I really enjoy helping people. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. So thanks for inviting me, Matt. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I thought you'd be a great addition to the group here. So ChatGPT, what the hell is this thing? I have played with it a little bit myself. I have, some mixed thoughts about it. I have some reservations, which we can address later. But what do you guys think about ChatGPT, what it is, and what's the impact of it on CRO?
I don't think anyone knows what this is, what it really is yet. It's interesting to see the conversations on Facebook and different groups, and it's been pretty interesting. I'll just throw it out there. I think some folks that might be familiar with the old spinners, it's kind of like a really advanced version of a spinner. It's a language model, and it's basically just predicting output. And I think folks are still thinking it's far more advanced than it really is. So it's interesting to see, like, people are asking it math questions, all sorts of stuff that it's not really built for. So it's been interesting to see how people are using all different use cases. So anyways, that's been my observation so far, but I really enjoy it. I think it's a neat tool.
So what do you think it's mostly for then? So if it's not for mathematics, what do you think is the use of ChatGPT?
Yeah, well, ChatGPT is a beta launch for OpenAI. OpenAI is a company that wants to move into AI, right? And whatever that is. And so they've developed different models, and they've got one model that will produce code. They've got one model that'll produce spoken language, right? They've got one model that'll produce images. Soon they'll probably have a model that does video, because if they can do images, they can do video. And then the ultimate goal with all this is to blend all those models together, which is kind of what ChatGPT is. It's a combination of two different models. It's the codex model and their language model smushed together. And so you're able to ask it programming language stuff, or you're able to ask it output for language. And really, it's just supposed to be there to help assist you through all that. And they have an API to automate too. So it's pretty interesting. So I think for what people are going to use it for, really word generation and code generation and images and video and just assisting through all that creative process. So I'm seeing a lot of people, they're trying to leverage it like it's supposed to do everything. And I feel like it's more of an assistant. And I think if the more people can lean into it like an assistant, I think the more successful people will be. So that's my take on it right now.
For me, just on a really basic level, I'm hopeful that it could potentially get more people into conversion rate optimization, because I know from, just searching around, if you try to learn about conversion rate optimization, there's definitely plenty of articles on the topic. But for a newcomer, it can be very, technical and intimidating. So I think that creates a barrier to entry for CRO. I'm constantly monitoring like the Google search trend data, and it's been pretty flat for a long time, many, many years. And really, it's staggering to me. Growth.design just did a really cool case study on ChatGPT, the Bing integration of it, and basically just lambasted them. Like, they always do it very politely, but, they raised some really big concerns, because it seems like they're not really using ChatGPT in a way that provides a good user experience. And if Microsoft can't even get it right, then what chance does the average user, right? They're leading by example too. So, when Flint McLaughlin always said the internet, with respect to websites, is like the blind leading the blind. And I just did an evaluation of a website yesterday, and it was like, you could just see that like there's this paradigm about websites that it's like, oh, this is our company website, when it should be a customer website. And that shift in thinking has not happened yet. And so, they build out this website where they're like, we do business with us. It's incredibly ineffective. Going back to the growth.design case study on it though, what they made really clear was like, they didn't even care about, getting people to use ChatGPT and providing a better, and revolutionizing search and getting Bing back into the search market. They're using it kind of as a vehicle to set your browser as the default browser and all these other things that have nothing to do with, ChatGPT. So they've really failed. But going back to what I was originally saying, you can go to ChatGPT and you can say, hey, how can I increase conversions on my website? And it will spit out like a list of 10 things that you can do. And it makes it, for me, more accessible and easier to understand. That way you can, kind of get an idea of what conversion rate optimization is. And then if you want to dig in deeper, or, hire someone to do it, then at least, because one thing that I learned, and I won't ramble on too much more, but when I had I had a gadget store in Abbot Kinney in Venice Beach, it was really fun because before I opened the store for many months, I thought, what I'm going to do? I'm going to open, because I don't know if you know Abbot Kinney in Venice Beach, but it's like this. It was voted the coolest street in America. And it's all these mom and pop shops, unique stores. Like, you go into these stores and it's like all products you've never seen before. They're not chain stores at all. And so I thought, wow, I'm moving opening a store. I got to raise my game. So I started scouring the internet for all kinds of cool electronic gadgets that, I've never seen in a store at the time. And then, we stocked the store and opened up, and we were a huge hit. But what I noticed very quickly was that people weren't buying these products, even though they were like the coolest products. The only people that were buying them were like very tech savvy people. But if I had someone out on the sales floor all the time, so that when someone came in and said, oh, what's this? Oh, that's a solar charger for your iPhone. It's a solar charger case. that you put on your iPhone, and there's a solar charger on the back, and it constantly charges your phone so you don't have to charge it. You know, they'd buy them all the time. But if we just left them out there, they would never buy them. And so the point I'm trying to make is like, you know, this long security story is like, people don't buy what they don't understand. And so us, you know, as conversion rate optimization professionals, we're kind of up against a wall in that sense, because, you know, the trend data just keeps showing this flat interest for it. And really only Fortune 500 companies and big e-com companies are really into it. And if we're going to get that, you know, trend increasing, you know, I think the first step is educating people how powerful this is, because, you know, it really is the best ROI of any type of marketing.
I think one of the things I'd observed, like, I think to Robert's point, there's some good ways to get like basic knowledge. So it's like, hey, I want to Google and learn about conversion rate optimization and like self-service about what we do. And I think ChatGPT does a decent job taking and analyzing the content that exists and spitting out something that summarizes it. But when I started to get more specific with things with ChatGPT, I would say, what should I change about this page? It would say things that are generic, like improve the design. So there's no way this is replacing what we're doing today. I think there's potential for this when combined with lots of other models and inputs to eventually create really smart, intuitive user experiences and designs. Maybe even be able to take in customer input and factor in user research. But so far, it's just showing to be basically the 101 on any subject, and maybe easier to get into than wading through different blog articles that might have different intent behind it. But any of these models are just going to be as good as the stuff that's being input, as that's the best kind of output you get from them.
I'm more concerned with how they're going to affect SEO, because we've got two different angles of attack here. One is that the search engines are planning to use it, which raises the question, are they just going to give you an answer, or are they going to still present other websites? Because without that, there is suddenly no SEO. There's just advertising. So that would be number one. And people have been saying that voice search was coming, you know, for at least 5 years. And this pretty much represents my ability to just talk to the phone and get what I want. The other concern is that people are absolutely spinning off articles. If they're not taking the care to validate what's being written as being both original and accurate, they may be in for some ugly surprises, because I have found lots of significant errors. And the first article I had, it helped me write. It actually worked well because it gave me ideas of areas of the topic I hadn't thought about originally to include. So I definitely got a much better piece of content out of it. But it took me 3.5 weeks to verify some of the facts that were in it. And I knew some of them were wrong going into that research. So we could end up with an internet full of lots more garbage. We'll see.
Yeah, I'd love to build on that, because I think, Sean, you mentioned like people are plugging in math equations and things to this. I actually talked to some of my friends who are mathematicians this weekend about it, and we just happened to be kind of nerding out about this. And what they described was when they put their own algorithms in, like questions that they would be asking candidates in their field, they would get answers as though it was someone who took one undergraduate course in a different subject that was related. So it was like kind of arbitrarily related. Some of the right words were connected, but it wasn't anywhere close to, you know, as sophisticated as the answers would require. So Lori, I think you're absolutely right. This is just like when Google launched or when Wikipedia launched, there should be some healthy skepticism about what's coming out of it.
My main concern with ChatGPT and OpenAI in general is just what's the accuracy and credibility of the output? Because it gives you an answer, but you don't know where that comes from. You don't know how that was, how the AI came up with that answer. Whereas if you go on a blog of someone that you trust, or a CRO site, for example, that has done a lot of testing and research, and there's a lot more credibility there. I tend to trust that a lot more than the output of ChatGPT. So there's that credibility element I think that's missing, or at least there's no transparency, right? It's a black box, so it just gives you an answer and you don't know where that came from.
Yeah, and at least Bing is attempting to tie that together, right? Like when I haven't had access yet because they still have a server overload, but it seems like from what I've seen, they're including footnotes and links. And, I saw some SEOs that posted, they're like, oh my gosh, it's already up. It's been an hour. And they're inside the AI with a link back to their blog post. So it is efficiently trying to, Bing's got this thing called Prometheus. So how it works is it's like a wrapper to the OpenAI engine. So when you type in search, it'll actually pause OpenAI and go through their indexing and try to smush it all together. And so they're trying to do that. I don't know. Google was not trying to do that from what I saw in their test. So I think to Lori's point, it's a little scary. Like, how are they going to approach search? But their business model is to keep people coming back. All these platforms, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, whoever it is, like their goal, their mission is to get traffic, right? And keep traffic and make you stay there as long as possible. So if they start pumping out AI answers, I don't know if that accomplishes the mission because it's almost too efficient. Like, they want you to scroll, they want you to look through stuff. So I think there's probably going to be some, a blend of it, like what Bing is attempting to do. It sort of makes sense to me. But yeah, I think it goes back, like when we all grew up, the internet was coming out, our parents would warn us, like, don't trust anything you read, like you got Abraham Lincoln telling you the internet's the best thing since sliced bread, right? So don't trust everything you read. So it'll be interesting with the AI because it's definitely just predicting words and it can get kind of out of control. But I think there's some really cool stuff with AI in general. Like if you look at IBM Watson, or you look at the other AI model or other AI companies out there and how they're utilizing it with data science and looking at big pieces of data and how they input data and manage data and observe data. I think there's some really neat stuff you can do. And even with OpenAI, you can feed it a lot of data to some point and get some better refined answers than what I've seen. So I think if you approach it just as a back and forth, it's very general, like AJ said. But if you can start priming it, kind of like if you talk to a person and prime them with info, you start getting better quality stuff from what I've seen. So I don't know if you've all experienced that, but that's what I've seen tinkering with it.
Yeah, and I think there's sort of like the perspective of the AI that's going to come along eventually. So answer this question as though you're an elementary school teacher. Answer your question as if you're a PhD on this subject, and being able to kind of match the user side of it and our own sophistication. So whether the model is figuring that out about us or we can ask it to do that, that feels like a pretty logical next step in making this more sophisticated, and also it to be able to divide up its data set in a more meaningful way.
I'll just throw one other piece out there. There's actually, you can train your own data with OpenAI using their API. There's something called embeddings and tuning. And with that, you can start to give it examples from maybe you want to have users come to your site and go and search and have them be able to find your, go sift through your content easier. You can feed it all of your own content and create a better experience on your own website. So they can actually find stuff and have it be more conversational. And you can use these tunings and embeddings to accomplish that. So I think there's ways to use what OpenAI has for our own needs with this GPT and do that for our users. So I thought that was really cool. I've been slowly learning about that.
So I feel like the current state of ChatGPT or OpenAI is that it's smarter in the way that it's able to process the information and output, for example, the personas or that sort of thing, right? You showed me a bunch of examples, Sean. But like for me, that again, the biggest problem is the accuracy. Where's the information coming from?
Right?
The insights, the conclusions, the recommendations that it gives you. It could be coming from the compilation of a bunch of websites that I wouldn't trust. So I don't know if it's smarter in that sense or more accurate, but it's definitely smarter in how it processes the information you give it.
Well, because we had that conversation, I don't know if it was yesterday or a few days ago, but like, how do we trust? Is this even accurate? I was showing you some data, and you're like, well, how do we even know that's right? Yeah. And I'm like, well, you're gonna have an expert look at the output, compare it to what we know as experts, and sort of guide that trust. Maybe have a rubric with it that we design. So it's interesting. But I'll just say one more point. I'll let it go around, percolate. But I think to your point, the prompt and the data going in versus what comes out, I'm learning is really important. Like I remember OpenAI said, like, it's really important that you understand how to phrase things correctly to get things to come out. Like when I'm writing code with it, I have a background as a developer, so I know how to kind of phrase things like pseudocode or talk in that way, like I'm speaking in code. And so I can get the output to be really clean. Like I have sometimes chunks of code coming out that work. I don't have to debug. But knowing how to do that, that's a totally different skill. And I think people that hone that skill are really going to shoot forward using the AI.
It's almost like the early days of Google too, before they had the massive data set of people asking it questions and then being able to suggest related questions, right? So if you don't have that expertise of saying like, search my inbox between these dates, like probably many of us on the call do have that to be able to really filter into the right information. It's kind of that same behavioral side of it, of people are going to ask really general questions and get really general answers back. I was going to say one thing, Matt, to your point around like the experience of it, which I think that this is a step forward on is natural language processing. It does a pretty good job of interpreting, even though the more specific you can be, the better the output will be. But it does a pretty good job interpreting it and spitting out something that's very legible, which feels like it is a level up on other types of systems I've played with recently too. Yeah. So there is some forward progress, even if we're skeptical about the inputs itself.
It feels like the response is smart, but I don't know how good and accurate and actually smart it is. I mean, it's like someone speaking with confidence, but not from competence.
Right.
Someone
speaking
said it's
with authority.
Kind of like mansplaining.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, the AI gives you a very confident answer, but okay, so it's being trained on a data set that comes from websites, books, articles, but which ones? Are they good? Are they credible? Was that the actual right answer that it got for the training data? I just can't really get over that at this point. At some point, we will trust it blindly, just like we will trust self-driving cars more than us driving the car. We're just not at that point yet. But I think it'll get to a point where we'll say, okay, the AI is definitely smarter than us, so we'll just believe whatever answers it gives us. We're not going to.
I think it's just going to be like social media and politics, where people just pick what they like and assume it's true. I mean, imagine what kind of answers you get when it's subjective. What's the best compact car? If it doesn't know anything about the asker, any answer it gives is essentially arbitrary. Best at what? So.
Well, I think there's also the note of it's only trained up to a certain point, right? I think Bing is trying to close the gap with their search engine, but they can't keep training the model as, they basically have to train the model independently of launching it, right? So for them to retrain it on 2020 up to 2023, I mean, it's a pretty big effort to train it, clean the data, and make it work right. And there's all sorts of issues with cleaning that data. Yeah, that's a whole nother problem.
So, I mean, currently it's still humans that are deciding. Is it just an algorithm that cleans the data, or is there still a bunch of humans that decide which sites are authoritative and where do you get the training data from?
Yeah, they're crawling probably common things like Wikipedia, and they're crawling Stack Overflow, and they're crawling libraries of code. They're crawling like very common things that we all use. And what they normally do is they train it on 80%, and then the other 20% is used as kind of like to balance it out, right? To make sure that it's actually progressing the right way. Like, for example, if I fed it Shakespeare, I would only want to give it 80% of Shakespeare. I don't want it to verbatim pump out Shakespeare identically. I want it to write like Shakespeare. So I only give it 80%, and then I save 20% to train it against to make sure it's speaking like Shakespeare. And then that's how we're getting these predictive sentences. Is it's not exactly verbatim what you might see, but it's pretty close. And that's how that's how this GPT, the transformer works essentially. So I'll add one point and then I'll let it go around circle again. When Elon Musk and they started it out of, they were all at Tesla, and I think Tesla had already formed, I believe. And they were working with Sam Altman and that group, and their AI engineer at Tesla actually started working. And I think they're the ones that looked at the Google research to implement the transformer. And he's the one that started actually building out this methodology around the transformer with that team. And there's a whole paper they looked at from Google, right? And so he, right now, they left, and he now is back at Tesla. But he said that 80% of his code that he writes at Tesla for the AI for their cars is from GPT, and the other 20% he has to, massage or whatever. But I just thought it was interesting that the reason I'm saying is he's got some really great videos on how to create GPT at home. And it's like a 3-hour YouTube video of him going through how to even build this thing. And he explains how they train it and all that stuff. It's gets pretty complicated. I got through about half an hour of it before I glazed over. But anyways, it's worth checking out. I can find his name here and I can mention it. But I thought that was, if everyone's just curious how this thing is built and they want at least the intro, I think it's worth checking him out.
Do you know how to handle, with the training data, how to handle kind of bleeding edge or cutting edge expertise versus the common knowledge out there, which might not be accurate, right? Like you'll usually have a minority of experts which are more correct or, have more of the truth, whether that's CRO or something else or science. You'll have like a minority of them that are further ahead or have thought out through an issue better than the mass of scientists, right? It's always that kind of 80-20. You'll have a minority of them which are more expert, if you will. So does it give more weight to, some people over others, or it just takes kind of an average of all the information available out there?
So you can find a bunch of experts and train it. They just have to have all the written language, right, on whatever topics you're trying to cover. So we can train the models to do that. But it's like I said, it's going to be kind of predictive words, trying to figure out like what you're trying to solve, right? And I think there may be gaps, right? Like it just depends on your input. If I'm asking it things that the model doesn't quite know and it just has to figure it out, that's when you're going to start getting sideways. Like it just doesn't have expertise and knowledge in certain areas. But you could train a CRO dedicated model and you could actually start getting it way more focused. What we're working, when you go to ChatGPT, you're dealing with kind of GPT and this codex on training wheels, and it's not necessarily focused on one thing, it's focused on everything. So it doesn't have knowledge on everything, right? I think it's probably trained on 10 or 20% of the internet. So there's a lot of things it doesn't know, and it's going to get a bit sideways on certain topics. It just doesn't know how to answer, but it'll answer it confidently.
And Matt, I think that's probably where we'll start to see these like break into their own models, right? Like there'll be certain models for certain use cases, whether or not it's directly tied to this data set or people kind of advertising their own data sets that are like for people learning from experts or for general purpose. So I think we'll see sort of like the market start to splinter in terms of like what they're arguing their AI is good at or how much data it's trained on. I have a question I want to throw out to Lori and Robert, because I think like as practitioners, I'm curious like what you guys are seeing, like how this is being utilized now or where you're seeing. Lori, you mentioned SEO is an area where it's a good baseline to get started with. But I'm just curious, like how are people actually starting to use this besides asking some questions?
In addition to content, which I see, and I just had this horrible picture in my mind of an AI site that's called "What Would Neil Patel Do?" Anyway, Robert, that one would actually be successful too. But I'm finding individuals that are far more clever than I am that are using it to write little snippets of code, which I think is incredibly clever, provided you can read the code well enough to know if it's going to do what it's supposed to do. I'm using it to speed up the article writing process, and I'd have to say, I think I've only done about half a dozen on it, and it's more of it's not always a time saver. I'd say in the long run, it's probably about a 50% time saver, but where I found it helpful was it raised more questions in my mind on what I needed to research to produce better content. But at the moment, I think people are just using it to fill their blog full of crap. That's what I think it's being used for.
You know what? I like that question, AJ. Thanks for asking, because I wanted to, we can't end this conversation without talking about what Sean introduced Matt and I to that kind of blew our mind, which was the sentiment analysis, right? So hopefully Sean can talk a little bit about that. But for us, I think Ted Kubaitis, who is like my favorite SEO, he is famous for saying that, we're all suffering from a failure of imagination right now because this is so new, right? I mean, like who could have predicted that the gig economy would take over so much, Uber and Lyft and all these things. Like it's almost impossible to know how these things are going to impact the long term of business, society, and so forth. Just a really simple example, like when we generate content with it, we can tell it, write sales copy as if you were Zig Ziglar, and it will do that. It knows Zig Ziglar, So you can't, the prompt engineering is very important. So it's crap in and crap out. I was watching an SEO video show this morning, and I apologize, I'm not familiar with the guest that was on there, but he says, it's basically, there's a famous saying that was quoted like in 1956 or something about language, and it was, you will know a word by the company it keeps, right? And that's how you learn a word, like contextually. And it's the same thing with the ChatGPT prompts. Like, if you're not using enough descriptive language, you're going to get an average product, right? So you really need to go overboard in the prompts that you create. So when we generate content, we're telling it, make the output in HTML, give 3, recommended sources for further reading, create a table, create an ordered list, an unordered list. Like, these are all things that have proven to move the needle for SEO. And then we spit it out in HTML, and we take the HTML and we copy and paste it in the blog. It's formatted, images, everything. So the prompt engineering is something that is going to be huge for people. So the sentiment analysis, Sean he's working on it. When he says he's listening to something, where he listened for 30 minutes and he got his mind kind of glazed over, that was complicated, because he's really a technical programmer by nature, and he's doing some amazing things with sentiment analysis. Maybe he could talk a little bit about that, but that's just the beginning of what he's working on. Like, it's crazy what he's doing with it, really.
Well, I just want to mention that Tesla's former head of AI, his name is Andre with a J, Andrej, Karpathy, Karpathy. Anyways, I just think he's awesome. It's worth checking out. He's basically I think he taught at, I could be wrong, I thought he taught at Stanford, or he has a PhD from Stanford. He may have taught at Stanford or MIT, but he was teaching AI as an instructor there. Now he's just doing it on his own YouTube channel. So if you're curious about how to even build GPT from scratch, he'll show you. So yeah, Robert, real quick, I'll just make it really simple. So what I've discovered, and for tips of just using the AI in general, from what I've seen, at least for in the sandbox and with ChatGPT, is I have sort of a buildup I do of the conversation. Like, I just don't ask it, hey, what do I do to make this page better? Give me some conversion rate tips for this page. Like, it's going to be pretty generic, and it doesn't build up, right? How these things work is they have like a look back window, just like if you're talking to a person and you're priming their brain, right? With information, you want to prime it first. That way there's some context to move forward on. And so knowing that, what I started doing was just like providing it data, right? So one thing you can do is go and take all your customer reviews and, maybe dump in 150 of them. Depends on character count, all that stuff, but go ahead and dump in, 100 reviews and clean it so it's just, in quotes, their review. If you don't have reviews, that's okay. Find a similar product on another website, like Amazon would be a good place, and go and harvest all of the 5-star and 1-star and mix them together, right? And then throw all that into ChatGPT and let it know that these are reviews for whatever type of company, and go ahead and feed that into the tool. And then once it has that in the look back window, you can start asking it things, right? Like, you can ask, what is the sentiment of the customer reviews? So the AI is really good at looking at evaluating the emotion and the sentiment and correlations of data. And so the sentiment is usually a score of -1, 0, or 1. And you just ask it, on a score of -1, 0, 1, what's the sentiment of this chunk of reviews, right? So you could feed it a whole bunch of chunks of reviews and build up your sentiment analysis and just get it an overall average. But once you have that primed, you can start asking all sorts of stuff, like, what are the top 10 correlations in all the reviews that our customers are saying? Like, what are their concerns? What are their needs? What are they looking for? Like, just start asking questions about the customers and, what are their frustrations? Like, how do we fix their frustrations? Because if you start using the customers as your backbone to drive your future prompts, like, you're going to get much I think you're just going to get the voice of your customer coming out of those prompts a lot cleaner than, you just going and pasting in a headline to a random page, be like, how do I make this headline better? Like, it doesn't really have any context of who's even looking at that. So if you can tie your customer data, whether it's yours or someone else's, into the page you're trying to develop, I think you'll probably get more refined stuff coming out because you've taken the time to refine it. So I tried to explain as simply as I could and give you some tips of how I'm doing it. So hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. We had a meeting with a lead, and like during the meeting, he did this in kind of real time. He took all the reviews, and not all of them, but he fed a bunch of reviews to ChatGPT, and he says, what are some of the most common complaints? So you could do a negative review sentiment analysis, a positive, an overall, and then he used that, and we started saying, well, you could create a value proposition out of this. You could say, create me a headline and a subheadline that taps into the most liked features of this company or this their product line or whatever. And then for objection handling, you can do the opposite and say, hey, write me some bullet points for some objection handling based on the most common negative reviews, right? So again, failure of imagination. Like, there are people out there that are being very creative with this, and Sean is protective of some of the stuff he's working on because it's really, really quite amazing and he's automating a lot of it too. So I think we're all so new to this still that we haven't realized what the potential is.
Yeah, and I'd be remiss not to kind of connect the dots here between what you're saying, Sean, about sentiment analysis and then my world of UX research. So in our world, like, sentiment analysis is similar to what you would do if you got survey results, where you just have open-ended responses. You can't really dig into why. You maybe can scale how widespread a problem is by asking the right questions, like beyond a review question, but asking specific questions about the experience. But it still isn't quite enough yet, right? And I suspect that's true of this data set too, where if I just told my clients to look at survey data, sentiment analysis, they'd be left with a lot of questions about why is this the issue, your own bias in how you ask that question and things like that. So I think we, as kind of researchers collectively using tools like this, like, there's so much power to automate low-level efforts of what we're doing. We have to be very careful to not assume that's enough. So even though we'll have rich data sets and nice charts and things that kind of point to thoughtful analysis of big data sets, it's still not always enough to do that when you need to pair that with deeper discussions to dig into why something happens or what the right solution might be. So I think it's a really exciting start, though. And I think thank you for taking us through that example, because I think a lot of people listening in have those reviews and aren't doing anything with it. And you better start with something.
Just want to wrap up that point. I think like, comes back to my original point. Like, we can't just expect the AI to be an employee and go do stuff. It's an assistant, and it's there with you as a sidekick, right? Like, you can give it all this data all day, but when it comes to the human condition and our minds, our emotions, and our intuition, we can intuit things. There's no way the AI can do that. Like, like, we can perceive things that, I can predict things into the future. There's no way the AI is ever going to be able to do. And you can intuit how grandma is going to come to the site and buy whatever she needs, or grandpa or whoever. And so I think those things better than any AI. Anyways, I just want to throw that out there.
Today.
But we're getting closer.
That's coming. That's coming for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's like the example of like being able to tell Google to book the appointment for your like the lunch you're going to have, right? So like, there's an assistant who's doing something very simple that you could have paid a person to do that was very simple and repeatable, and AIs are really good at repeatable things, and then they're just kind of building a little bit more sophistication in how that's being delivered.
I think too, from my experience, again, going back to if you believe that the internet with respect to website design and website copy is the blind leading the blind, is that the opposite end of the spectrum of that is high ranking content, right? It's usually really good, and Google's very good at finding high ranking content, but they're terrible at evaluating sales copy. It's irrelevant to them. Like, they're incapable of saying, hey, this has some really good persuasive and high converting copy on this page. And so in that sense, you could get way better output from ChatGPT than almost every other writer, because writers, who can write on an informational topic that can't necessarily be persuasive and sell a product. That's a different type of writing skill. And so what we're finding is, like, especially when combined with sentiment analysis, you can get some output that just blows away the competition, almost everybody, because the general sense is, when I was evaluating that hardwood flooring company that's been around 60 years and just got a new website developed, and it's absolutely atrocious. It's like somebody who really loves writing and is a very good writer, but they wrote so much on the homepage that it's never going to be read. And it's all, we're the best. We are the best. We're the best. We're the best. We're awesome. We've been around. We. And it's like there's no room for the customer in the conversation. They don't even solve any problems. They're missing key elements. So if just the average user was able to tap into ChatGPT for that, it's stellar for that. They could leave their competition in the dust. They could literally go and say, hey, write me, a great headline and subheadline, a very persuasive, again, failure of imagination, use a lot of words and be very specific. And they can create some fantastic sales copy with ChatGPT. With informational content, it's not so easy, right? Because it's almost impossible out of the box, because all it's doing is averaging everything that it's learned through its language model. You're going to get good copy, but it's not enough to rank, right? But I think with sales copy, it can be really fantastic.
Very interesting topic. I hope we do some more of these fireside chats. I think that leads to some potentially good insights and at least food for thought for people watching and for ourselves as well. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it.
Have a good day, everyone.
You too. Bye,
Cheers.
guys.
Bye-bye.
Girls.